Let's turn to Ariel Ruiz Soto. He's a senior policy analyst at the Migration Policy Institute, and he joins me from Sacramento, California. Ariel, welcome to the program. Give us a sense in terms of who these migrants are that are being rounded up and deported. And just because you're being detained doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be deported.
Right. Thank you for the invitation. What we are seeing currently is in some ways very similar to what we've seen on previous administrations, including the first term of President Trump. What we're seeing now is ICE immigration officials trying to detain and deport migrants in the country who are here regularly. Many of them are working in different conditions. They are usually at a workplace near or outside their family household, and in some cases near also around the border. That is going to likely continue for the foreseeable days. It's important to note that most of these people that are being detained and removed, potentially, are not likely to have criminal background. And so therefore, their biggest administrative charge is going to be being in the United States without legal status. There are some, especially likely in the future, some that are in state prisons or in other law enforcement facilities that may be having criminal backgrounds that may be sent back to their countries of origin, but for the most part, the migrants that are going to be deported or have been deported so far do not have criminal backgrounds that we can confirm. In particular, we also seen that there are some children that are being sent back in these military planes, so they have been relatively less and under different conditions when they're boarding the planes going to their origin countries.
So, Ariel, let me ask you this. What happens if you came to the United States, you ended up getting married, you're a couple, you're young parents who had children in the United States, so your children are American citizens. What happens to those children and what happens to their parents?
So it depends on the situation of the parents. If the parents who entered the country now have an adjustment of status, they likely could stay. But if there is somebody who's undocumented within the household, that person could be potentially eligible for removal. What would happen in that case is that the parent could likely be deported from the United States to their country of origin, and that their children would stay here with the remaining parent or with a family member. However, I want to make sure that we understand that even when somebody's detained, there's a legal process for most cases for people to be determined to be removed. That means that in this case, potentially, a parent who is undocumented still has to go through a court hearing, and in many cases, hopefully with legal representation, so that they can make a case for why they should stay. One of the criteria that the lawyer would likely make is that their children, U.S. citizens, would need them to be here, according to the current examples that we've seen. But of course, if those migrants don't have legal representation, many of them could be deported much more quickly.
And talk about what these migrants are going through right now. I mean, I'm sure you have conversations and encounters with many of them. What are they telling you? I'm assuming fear has taken over their lives.
Well, we don't work directly with migrants, but certainly the reports that we have seen and also with community organizations that we have followed suggest that migrants are incredibly fearful today. They were fearful before the inauguration of President Trump, and now are trying to understand how the policies may or may not affect them. For many of them, depending on where they're at, a lot of state and local policies may actually try to insulate them from deportation operations by ICE, for example. But it's very clear and important to tell everybody listening that migrants or localities and states are not able generally to stop ICE immigration officers who come with judicial warrants for a particular person. And in fact, what we've seen in the past, and at least in the last administration of President Trump, it is usually there are collateral deportations of people who may be at the wrong place when immigration agents are trying to go after one particular person. And so that is certainly something that is causing fear. We've seen also potentially that there are some families and some individuals that are no longer seeking assistance that they're entitled to from local governments or state governments, and that could potentially have a chilling effect, not just for them, but for their children.
And, there's been a lot of focus on the Trump administration's deportation policies, but the Biden administration carried out 1.5 million deportations in President Biden's first years of office, and that's according to figures by Migration Policy Institute, around the same number under Trump's first term. So, I mean, what do you say to people who are criticizing the Trump administration, but they weren't doing the same under the Biden administration?
Look, there's a very clear point of view here that I think a lot of people have seen from this. the Biden administration did in fact increase removals from the country, especially removals of what they thought were priorities for migrants in the United States. The difference today with the Trump administration, I think, is that they're trying to increase the visibility of the deportations, suggesting that more of those migrants are criminals or another type of bad actor in the United States, and therefore they should be deported. In practice, we've seen that the numbers of those who actually have criminal backgrounds is relatively small, but President Trump, because this was a winning issue for his campaign, wants to try to make that front and center. We'll see if that continues going forward, and it's important to note that even under the current Trump administration, there are limited resources, limited number of planes, limited number of agents to be able to conduct these type of removals. So we would not likely see a significant increase in deportations in the first few days or weeks. And in fact, what we observe over the weekend, the thousands of removals that happened Saturday or Sunday, are actually somewhat in line with what we've seen previously under Biden administration's higher episodes of removals. So it's not changed significantly yet, but what's changed is the rhetoric and the visibility of these type of deportations.
No, you're right about that. I can't argue with that. Ariel Ruiz Soto joining us from Sacramento. Thank you.